Slum Boy vs. Billionaire Board, a story that will checkmate your assumptions. Come here, boy, show me how you play chess in the slums. The voice sliced through the air of the Beverly Hills mansion like a well-aimed dagger, sharp, polished, and dripping with entitlement. Mrs. Victoria Whitman, heiress, socialite, and self-proclaimed philanthropist, didn't ask. She commanded. And everyone in that marble-coated living room knew. When Victoria spoke, people obeyed. Diego Santos, all of 17, stood quietly beside his mother Carmen, who was balancing a silver tray full of hors d'oeuvres. They were there to serve, not to speak. Certainly not to play games with the elite. But the moment Victoria's icy blue eyes landed on Diego, she had made up her mind. Tonight, her charity event would feature some live entertainment. The guests, a mix of gray-haired businessmen, carefully botoxed socialites, and politicians in $1,000 suits, chuckled behind their crystal champagne flutes. The scent of money hung thicker than the perfume. They weren't laughing with Diego, of course. They were laughing at him. Victoria's voice rose again, theatrical and taunting. I bet he can at least move the pieces. Let's see how this little street genius fares against someone who's actually studied the game. Laughter rippled through the room like the smug sound of privilege high-fiving itself. Mr. Hamilton, owner of multiple hotel chains, leaned toward his equally rich wife and whispered, I bet he doesn't even know the night moves in an L shape. More laughter, more champagne, more superiority. Carmen's hands trembled slightly around the tray. 20 years she had worked in this house. Cleaned toilets, polished chandeliers, raised her boy under this very roof, while being treated as little more than background noise. And now, her son was being served up as a party trick. Carmen, Victoria said sweetly, her words sugar-coated with venom. Why don't you stop serving for a moment? I want you to watch your son. It'll be educational. For both of you. Diego didn't flinch. He didn't even blink. He simply looked around the room. At every amused face, every pitying smile, every shallow eye pretending not to see the cruelty. He had learned one thing growing up in the slums: silence speaks volumes. And tonight, it was screaming. He finally stepped forward. Calm. Still. Measured. Of course, Mrs. Whitman, he said, voice smooth as silk but eyes sharp as a blade. It'll be my pleasure. Something shifted. For a split second, the room quieted. There was something in his tone, something in the way he held himself. Like a storm gathering beneath the calm sea. Some of the guests leaned in, suddenly unsure if this was going to be the light-hearted joke they thought it was. Victoria settled into her plush leather chair, basking in her imagined generosity. Excellent. I bet you've never played on a board like this before, have you? Genuine Italian marble. Each piece worth more than, well, more than you'd understand. Someone chuckled. But State Representative Jennifer Mills, seated near the window, raised an eyebrow. Victoria, are you sure this isn't cruel? The boy's going to be humiliated. Nonsense, Victoria replied with a smirk. It's a learning opportunity. He'll get to tell his little friends he played chess in a real mansion. But what Victoria Whitman didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Diego had already played thousands of games. Not in mansions, but in his mind. Not with pieces of Italian marble, but with dreams carved out of poverty and grit. While other kids in his neighborhood played video games, Diego devoured chess books from the dusty corner of the public library. He watched YouTube matches on a cracked second-hand laptop he'd fixed himself. His heroes weren't celebrities, they were grandmasters: Kasparov, Fischer, Carlsen. By 17, he had memoized over 200 openings. New traps that could dismantle even seasoned players. He didn't just play chess, he breathed it. And tonight, he wasn't just here to play. He was here to prove something. As Victoria dramatically placed the pieces on the board, Diego's eyes scanned every guest in the room. He wasn't preparing for a game. He was preparing for war. A silent, strategic war waged on a battlefield of 64 squares. Because when this match ended, it wouldn't just be Victoria who learned a lesson. It would be every smug face in that room. Every person who had ever looked down at someone for the crime of being poor. And it wouldn't just be a checkmate. It would be justice. Want to see what happened when Diego made his first move? Hit that subscribe button. Because what came next flipped the whole room upside down. Sometimes, the most expensive mistake you can make is judging someone by how they look. Victoria Whitman took her place on the white side of the chessboard like a queen entering a throne room, poised, smug, untouched by failure. She didn't just want to win. She expected to. "I always play white, dear. It's a family tradition," she purred, like that meant anything. Of course, in real chess, colors are chosen at random, but rules are for those who don't own the room. Diego didn't argue. He didn't flinch. He simply nodded and began placing his black pieces with a strange, sharp precision, each one perfectly centered, aligned, and calm, like his hands had done it 1,000 times before. From across the room, Mr. Hamilton raised an eyebrow. Something about the way Diego touched the pieces. It wasn't casual. It wasn't clumsy. It was intentional. Victoria smiled for her audience. "Let's make this interesting," she said, her voice dancing with arrogance. "If the boy even manages to scare me once, I'll donate $1,000 to some public school." Laughter. But this time, Diego looked up and smiled. Not a warm smile. Not a friendly one. It was the kind of smile his mother, Carmen, feared. The same one she saw when Diego was 9 and a teacher called him slow. The same smile he had when he told her at 12, "I don't need help with math anymore." That smile never ended well for the other person. Victoria opened with a pawn, e4. King's pawn opening. "We learned that at Harvard," she announced proudly, like she was teaching a toddler how to walk. Diego replied instantly, c5. The Sicilian defense. A hush fell over the room. No laughter now. No smug comments. Because that wasn't a random move. That was theory. Serious theory. Congresswoman Mills leaned forward slightly. "Interesting." Victoria's fingers twitched. A small pause. 3 seconds of hesitation. It told Diego everything he needed to know. She didn't understand why she played her moves, only how. Like a dancer who memorized the steps but never heard the music. She played nf3, and while she thought about her next move, Diego drifted, just for a moment. He was 9 again, holding a torn chess book he'd found in a trash bin behind the library. Carmen, coming home from a 14-hour shift, looked at him and asked, "Mijo, why chess?" "To be like the rich kids, Mom. They always say they are smarter than us." No computer. No lessons. Just a dream and a dusty library table. While other boys played video games, Diego walked 3 kilometers after school just to read about grandmasters no one else had ever heard of. Back in the present, Victoria played d3, a move that screamed fear. Cautious. Defensive. It wasn't just a chess move, it was a glimpse into her soul. Diego played nc6 immediately, developing with clarity, confidence. His every move came in under 5 seconds. It wasn't speed. It was certainty, like he had already seen the end of the game. "Our little boy is moving too fast," Victoria scoffed to her friends. In real chess, you think before you move. And that's when Diego made his first calculated mistake. He paused, pretended to think, let the silence stretch for 15 long seconds, and then moved g6, setting up what looked like a casual, untrained move. Victoria smirked. "See? No patience. Typical." But Mr. Hamilton leaned in, recognizing the pattern. His eyes narrowed. "Victoria, he's building a fast dragon." Victoria blinked. "A what?" "The Sicilian dragon variation," he muttered. "It's complex." Suddenly, Victoria's perfectly composed face cracked, just slightly. She turned back to the board with a little more tension in her shoulders. "Nonsense," she said stiffly. He probably saw it in some Netflix show. But the moves kept coming. Not wild. Not flashy. Just perfect. Harmonies. Every piece Diego moved fit like a note in a song only he could hear. The board was no longer a game. It was his canvas. And Diego? He wasn't responding to her anymore. He was conducting. From the corner, Carmen watched, breath caught in her throat. Her son wasn't just playing. He was revealing something. Something even she hadn't seen before. Because Victoria had no idea. She hadn't invited a poor boy to her mansion. She had invited her own downfall. Want to know the moment Diego turned the room against her with one single move? Subscribe now, because what happens next doesn't just break her ego. It shatters it. She had worked in that mansion for over 20 years. She had scrubbed every tile, polished every chandelier, and endured every snide comment like it was just part of the job. But today, standing quietly in the corner, hands clenched together, Carmen saw something she never imagined she would see: fear in Victoria Whitman's eyes. Not the fear of losing a game, the fear of losing an illusion. For the first time, Victoria, the untouchable queen of Beverly Hills, was starting to realize she might not be as brilliant, as cultured, or as superior as she had always believed. And the person shaking that illusion was the teenage son of her maid. Each sarcastic comment Victoria made, each humiliation she tried to inflict on Diego, only sharpened his focus. What she didn't realize was that her arrogance was feeding something inside him. A quiet fire. One move at a time, that fire was getting closer to burning down everything she stood for. Move 10. Diego made a strange play. He sacrificed a pawn. The room barely noticed. But Mr. Hamilton, an old chess enthusiast, nearly choked on his whiskey. His eyes widened. "This boy just set a trap," he muttered. "Victoria, this kid is no amateur." But Victoria, always drunk on her own importance, just waved him off. "Oh please," she scoffed. Probably something he picked up watching a YouTube video. "I'll finish this in 5 minutes." But then, something unexpected happened. Diego stood up. He didn't say a word to Victoria. Instead, he walked silently over to his mother. Carmen froze. The entire room followed his every step. He leaned in, his voice low but steady, echoing through the thick silence. "Mom, remember when you told me that one day I'd show them who we really are?" Carmen nodded, eyes already wet. Of course she remembered. It was Diego's 15th birthday. She couldn't even afford a cake that day. He had found her crying in the kitchen and whispered, "Don't worry, Mom. One day, they'll see." From across the room, Congresswoman Mills wiped a tear from the corner of her eye. "That boy has more class than all of us put together," she whispered to her husband. Victoria tapped her nails on the table, trying to hide her unease. "Can we continue? I have better things to do today." But when Diego returned to the board, something had changed. The shy server boy was gone. What sat down now was a young man forged in sacrifice, shaped by long nights, broken keyboards, dusty library books, and the unshakable love of a mother who had given up everything for him. Move 11. His fingers glided across the board like an artist finishing a masterpiece. With one move, he created a double threat. Defend the king? Lose your queen. Defend the queen? Face checkmate in 3. Victoria's smile disappeared. This can't be right," she whispered, staring at the board like it had betrayed her. Hamilton leaned in again. "Victoria, he's outplaying you. And he probably never stepped inside a real chess club." Around the room, silence spread like wildfire. Champagne glasses were set down. Phones forgotten. Even Hamilton's wife, who had been scrolling through a fashion magazine, was now fully focused. Carmen watched her son closely. That look on his face, it was the same one she saw when he was 12 and found the chess section in the public library. The same focus he had while staring at a second-hand monitor, replaying legendary games for hours. The same fire that woke him up at 5 a.m. to practice tactics before school. Victoria finally moved. A desperate, clumsy escape. Too late. Diego moved his queen with surgical calm. "Check," he said softly. It wasn't just a threat. It was a statement. A crown was falling. There were now 3 ways for him to win, and 0 for her to recover. Victoria stared in disbelief. Her lips trembled, not in fear, but in rage. Rage that she, the hostess, the elite, the flawless, was being publicly defeated by someone she had always considered beneath her. This isn't possible," she stammered. "You must have memorized that from somewhere." Diego finally smiled. The first real smile of the night. Not arrogant. Just honest. "You're right, he said, locking eyes with her. "I learned it from Gary." "Gary?" she asked, confused. "Kasparov." The name hit like thunder. And in that moment, no one saw Diego as the help. They saw him for what he truly was, a master in the making. Kasparov, Diego said calmly. Kasparov taught you? Hamilton asked, choking on his drink. Not personally, Diego replied with a small smirk, moving a piece into what was clearly the final position. But I've studied all his documented games. 1,830, to be exact. This sequence? He used it against Karpov, 1984, Game 23, World Championship. The room froze. Victoria Whitman, who just moments ago carried the air of royalty, looked around, not for answers, but for support. For validation. But what met her wasn't admiration. It was awkward silence, and the cold sting of quiet judgment. She had lost them. For the first time in her carefully curated life, people weren't impressed by her. They were embarrassed for her. Carmen stepped forward. Her voice, for the first time in years, cut through the room like glass. My son woke up every morning at 5 a.m. to study before school. He walked 6 miles to the public library because we couldn't afford internet. And when our lights were cut off, he studied chess by candlelight. Not a single champagne glass moved. The room was still, not out of politeness, but shame. Diego turned to his mother, the weight of the moment sitting on his shoulders, but the fire in his eyes unshaken. He gave her a soft smile, not cocky, not smug, but full of quiet pride. Then he looked back at the board. Checkmate, he said gently, placing his queen in a position no one in the room could argue with. It was over. Victoria stared at the board for what felt like an eternity, as if the pieces might rearrange themselves. As if this was a dream. But the board stayed the same. Cold. Final. True. She finally looked up at Diego. The boy she'd mocked. The son of her maid. The one person in the room who hadn't just played a game, but rewritten every assumption about who belongs at the top. And the people around her? They weren't looking at Diego like he was a servant anymore. They were looking at him like a master. Victoria Whitman, social queen of Beverly Hills, had just been dethroned by a teenage boy from the wrong zip code. And she knew it. But what she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that this wasn't the end. This was just move one in a much bigger game. A game that would change everything. She stared at the fallen king on the board, her fingers trembling slightly as she reached toward it, like she could undo what just happened. This was luck, she whispered. Her voice cracked. He must have memorized that sequence. This can't be real. Hamilton stood slowly. He didn't look smug, just amazed. Victoria, he said, that boy just executed a variation of the Sicilian I've never even seen, and I've played this game for 40 years. Congresswoman Mills, sensing the moment, quietly took out her phone and began recording. She knew a viral moment when she saw one. The fall of a billionaire socialite, defeated in her own home, by the son of her maid? That wasn't a story, that was national content. I don't accept this. Victoria snapped, standing abruptly and knocking over 2 marble pieces. No one learns to play like that on their own. Someone trained him to embarrass me. Diego remained seated, calm, still unshaken. Would you like a rematch? He said evenly. I can play anyone here, or all of them at once, if you prefer. A ripple moved through the guests. Nervous laughter. Shocked silence. Was he serious? After what they'd just seen, no one was ready to bet against him. You're being arrogant now, Victoria hissed, her face red, her voice cracking. A boy from the slums doesn't talk to his superiors like that. And that's when Carmen stepped forward again. But this time, she didn't lower her eyes. She didn't bow her head. She looked Victoria Whitman, her boss for 20 years, straight in the eye. My son is not from the slums, Carmen said. We are a working-class family. And he's not being arrogant, he's just being honest about his talent. Something you clearly can't do about your own. The silence this time was louder than any applause. No, Carmen said quietly, her voice like steel wrapped in silk. I didn't forget my place. I remembered my worth. A tense silence fell over the room. Even Hamilton shifted uncomfortably, sensing things had spiraled beyond repair. Victoria, he said gently, perhaps it's time to admit the obvious. The boy is talented. Genuinely. But Victoria Whitman scoffed. Talented? she sneered. Don't be ridiculous. This was a setup. Someone trained him, coached him, to humiliate me. At that, Diego stood up slowly. He wasn't angry. He didn't need to be. His calm alone unsettled everyone in the room. Mrs. Whitman, he began, voice steady, eyes unwavering. I wasn't trained to humiliate you. I trained myself, for respect. I spent 8 years studying chess because I dreamed of playing against people who loved the game. People who believed talent wasn't reserved for those born in mansions. He paused, scanning every face in the room, each one now paying attention not out of curiosity, but out of guilt. When you said, "Show me how you play in the slums," I thought you were giving me a chance. I thought maybe you respected the game. But now I see, it was never about the game. It was about putting me in my place. From the corner, Congresswoman Mills lowered her phone, her face unreadable. How old are you, Diego? 17. And how long have you been playing? Seriously? Since I was 9. Mills turned to Victoria, her tone cold. You were just defeated by a self-taught prodigy, a teenager your family employs, and you thought it was a joke. Victoria's confidence cracked. Her voice came out thin, barely a whisper. I didn't know he played seriously. Hamilton snapped. The real issue isn't how seriously he played. It's how unseriously you treated him. Why? Because he's your maid's son? Because he's black? Or just because he's not rich? Silence. Diego began resetting the board, placing each piece back with precision. Thanks for the game, Ms. Whitman, he said without sarcasm. It was educational. Then he turned to Carmen. Mom, can we go? I've got school tomorrow. She nodded, quietly removing the serving apron she'd worn all evening. But before leaving, she faced Victoria one last time. Thank you, she said, for showing me my son belongs in better rooms than this. As Diego and Carmen reached the door, Congresswoman Mills called out, Diego, are you interested in a scholarship? He turned, surprised. Very interested. She walked over and handed him her card. Call me Monday. There are universities that would fight for someone like you. Diego gave her a genuine smile, his first of the night. I'll be ready. Victoria stood frozen. Her empire of image and status had collapsed in under an hour. She wasn't admired anymore. She was pitied. And she knew, deep down, that no public relations team could fix this. As the door shut behind Diego and Carmen, the guests looked at one another, unsure what to say. Hamilton was the first to move. I should get going. One by one, they left, quietly, stiffly, leaving behind only half-finished champagne glasses and the weight of judgment. Victoria stood alone in the silent room, eyes locked on the chessboard, where her king still lay defeated. What she didn't know was that this was never about just a game. It was the beginning of a much bigger match. One that Diego Santos had already begun planning. One that didn't take place on a board, but in a world that desperately needed to learn the same lesson Victoria had just been dealt. True class isn't about money or surnames, it's about character. 6 months later, Diego Santos walked through the prestigious halls of Stanford University, books in one hand, a coffee in the other. He was now a freshman in engineering, attending on a full scholarship. Congresswoman Mills had kept her word, introducing him to donors, educators, and people who saw more than where he came from. They saw who he was becoming. As he passed a bulletin board, he paused. A flyer caught his eye, Stanford Chess Club, tryouts this Friday. He smiled. Not because he needed to prove anything anymore, but because he finally belonged in a room where respect came before judgment. And this time, he wasn't just a guest. He was a player. What began as an ordinary evening in a Beverly Hills mansion became a moment the internet would never forget. The video didn't go viral because someone secretly recorded it. Congresswoman Mills posted it herself. She shared the story of a teenage boy named Diego Santos, who humiliated a wealthy socialite in front of an elite audience. But it wasn't just about a chess match. It was about class, race, assumptions, and the quiet brilliance of a young man who had been underestimated his entire life. Headline after headline exploded across social media. Young prodigy destroys millionaire in brutal chess match. Beverly Hills humiliation. Maid's son becomes national inspiration. Within 2 weeks, the clip had crossed 3 million views. People weren't just watching it, they were talking about it. Everywhere. The comments said it all. That woman got what she deserved. That boy deserves the world. And while Diego became a symbol of hope, Victoria Whitman, once praised in social circles, saw her world crumble. The fallout. Her golf club revoked her membership under pressure from other members. 3 high-profile charities removed her name from event invitations. Even Hamilton, her lifelong friend, stopped speaking to her. Victoria's always been proud, Hamilton's wife whispered at a Malibu dinner. But to humiliate a child in her own home like that? That's cruelty, not class. The most painful part for Victoria? Diego never sought revenge. He didn't post about her. He didn't gloat. He just played chess, calmly, flawlessly, and let her expose herself. It wasn't a setup. It wasn't luck. It was years of discipline, sacrifice, and quiet ambition finally being recognized. Carmen's rise. While Victoria watched her reputation collapse, Carmen, Diego's mother, was offered a position as supervisor at a luxury hotel in Santa Monica, triple the salary, full benefits. It wasn't charity. It was earned, recognition long overdue. Diego's mission. Instead of basking in the spotlight, Diego built something. He launched a free online chess platform, connecting kids from underserved communities with mentors from top colleges. Within 6 months, over 1,200 students had joined. But Diego wasn't just teaching chess. He was teaching strategy, resilience, and self-worth. In an interview with CNN, he was asked if he still held a grudge against Victoria. His response: "Grudges are like useless pieces on a board. They just get in the way of the real game. I'd rather build." Victoria watches in silence. Alone in her mansion, with champagne that had long since gone flat, Victoria watched that same CNN interview. She didn't cry, but for the first time in her life, she understood. This wasn't about losing a game. She had lost something far more valuable, the chance to grow, to see the world outside her bubble, and to treat another human being with dignity. Hamilton called her once. Only once. "Victoria, you created that disaster. Diego just showed more grace than you ever did." Legacy in the making. Diego didn't just play chess that night. He redefined the game. He turned a humiliating setup into a platform for thousands. He turned an insult into inspiration. He turned his pain into power. And most of all, he made sure that no other maid's son would ever feel less than because of where they came from. Today, a photo of Diego receiving his first academic honor at Stanford University hangs in Carmen's living room. Next to it, a framed certificate from his chess program, which has already helped change the futures of thousands of kids. That's not a trophy. That's a checkmate to prejudice. And Victoria? The world moved on. She became a cautionary tale. Because in the game of life, the people who try to tear others down rarely win. The ones who lift others up? They build empires of impact. Diego Santos wasn't just a prodigy. He became a movement. And that's a kind of checkmate no money can undo. If this story touched your heart, hit that subscribe button for more real-life tales of grit, growth, and greatness. Because true power isn't in where you're born, but in what you choose to become. Explosion symbol.